Family practitioner. Welcome to Holding the Work, Reflections for Child and Family Practitioners. My name is Ashleigh. I'm a children's therapist, social worker, and supervisor. I created this podcast as a reflective space for practitioners working with children, parents, and families. Whether you're a social worker, counsellor, play therapist, psychologist, case manager, or any other practitioner who works with children and families, this podcast is a place to pause, think about the work, and keep growing in ways that are trauma-informed, relational, and honours the people that we work with, as well as you as a practitioner. I'm recording this episode on Murwinawina country in the Hobart area of Lutruwita, Tasmania. I acknowledge the Palawa peoples as the traditional owners of the country I'm working on, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and express my deepest gratitude for the knowledge, wisdom, and lore that has been and continues to be shared with us so generously today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad that you're here listening in on this episode. So for this particular episode, I'd like to talk about practitioner wellbeing after emotionally charged and activating sessions. So if you work therapeutically with children, parents, and families, there is every chance that you have left a session feeling activated, unsettled, heavy, tearful, flat, preoccupied, or really deeply tired. These experiences are not a sign that you're doing the work badly or that you're a bad therapist. They are often part of what it means to do this work with depth, humanity, and care. So I had an example of this when I first settled back into client-facing practice. Just for context, I had been out of a client-facing role with children for about 12 months, recovering from my own trauma. And becoming activated during a session was something that I was really quite worried about. I'd worried that I wouldn't be able to hold the child while also trying to hold myself and regulate myself at the same time. During one session in particular, the room was in absolute chaos. Projectiles had been thrown around the room and landed in their final resting place. Every toy in my playroom, in the therapy room, had been dumped and scattered across the floor. And a child was playing out a scene of fear, terror, and vulnerability. And I had also had the parent in that particular session as well, and everybody's nervous system was quite activated, including my own. When I reflect back on this particular session, I remember feeling incredibly vulnerable during that particular moment. So the feelings of fear, terror, and vulnerability were not unfamiliar feelings to me. They were part of my own story too, and not easy feelings for me to sit with, let alone feelings for me to experience in my body while trying to stay present for a child that I was working with. But instead of avoiding those feelings or pushing them away or rushing away from what was happening in the room, I moved towards it. And I remember having quite an emotional response at that particular moment. My eyes were watery, and in a cracked voice, I said, to the little person I was working with, "I'm feeling scared. I wonder if you're feeling scared too." "I am scared," replied the little person I was working with at the time. They were 3.5 years old. I left that session feeling absolutely exhausted and floored. I even cried on the way home and just really wanted to be in the company of my partner. Not because I needed to talk through every detail of what happened in that particular session, but because I needed safety, connection, and co-regulation myself. When I later explored that particular session in supervision, I was worried that my emotional response meant that I was no longer cut out for working with children. But instead, supervision helped me understand something very different was happening. What had taken place wasn't a failure, but a deeply attuned and powerful moment, one that mattered not only for the child that I was working with, but also me as a practitioner too. So why do we get so emotionally charged during some sessions? So child and family therapy are relational, embodied, and emotionally rich forms of work. And I'm probably really preaching to the converted here. It's probably something I didn't need to tell you. So we do not sit outside the therapeutic process as neutral observers. We are in relationship with children and families, and our bodies, histories, values, and nervous systems are part of that relational field. So that means that some sessions will affect us more deeply than others. And this can happen because we're exposed to trauma stories, traumatic play themes, and relational pain. We are holding grief, sadness, anger, helplessness, or fear alongside children and families. We're navigating conflict, crisis, safeguarding concerns, or child protection worries. We may identify with the child, the parent, or the family system in some way. We are often holding complexity, competing needs, and uncertainty. We could be working with ethical tension or moral distress that can arise in our work. And our own nervous system is responding in real time to what is unfolding in the room. So for practitioners committed to trauma-informed or trauma-responsive practice, this is such an important truth to remember. Being activated by the work doesn't automatically mean something has gone wrong or we're failing at the work or you're not cut out to be doing this work anymore, like I thought. Often it means that you are engaging in deeply human work that asks a great deal of your presence and capacity. So after emotionally charged sessions, activation can show up in many different ways. So you might notice racing thoughts, replaying the session over and over, self-doubt or second-guessing your responses, physical tension in your chest, your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach, all over your body. You might be more irritable or feeling emotionally short. You might be experiencing numbness or shutdown. You might be experiencing an urgency to fix, to rescue, or to act immediately. You might even have difficulty focusing on notes or moving into the next task. You might even find it hard to be fully present with your next client, your next person that you're working with. You might be feeling tearful, heaviness, or depletion, and you might even have trouble switching off at the end of the day. So sometimes activation is loud and feels and looks quite obvious, but other times it can be quieter and more subtle. And this may show up as feeling unusually flat, becoming highly task focused, rushing your notes, or feeling emotionally disconnected for the rest of your day. And these are moments where reflective practice, not self-criticism, becomes so important. So one of the parts of this work I believe deserves far more open conversation is this. Practitioners have nervous systems too. We spend so much time supporting children and families to understand regulation, co-regulation, safety, feelings of overwhelm. But those same processes are also happening inside of us while we work as well. We're not outside that relational field, we're in it. So when a child is feeling or expressing feelings of terror, panic, rage, helplessness, or deep vulnerability, our nervous system is taking in far more than just words. We're registering tone, movement, silence, their facial expressions, pace, danger cues, emotional intensity. If what is unfolding in the room connects with our own history, values, fears, or protective instincts, our response may become even stronger. And the example that I gave earlier about the 3.5-year-old is a really great example of that. So this can look like having a racing heart, a tight chest, tears in the eyes, like what happened to me, shallow breathing, urgency, fear, dissociation, exhaustion, or a strong protective pull towards the child. It can also look like going blank or becoming hyper-focused on getting it right, or feeling unsure about what to say or do next. But most importantly, having these feelings and sensations doesn't mean that our response is harmful or unhelpful. Sometimes our nervous system responses offers really valuable information. It may tell us that something deeply important is happening in the room, and it may help us recognize the emotional truth of the child's experience. It may alert us to grief, rupture, fear, or danger that needs to be named and held with care. But even when our own response is clinically useful, it still needs tending to afterwards. When we repeatedly move towards distress, fear, pain, and complexity in our work without noticing what is happening inside of us, we can begin to carry more than what is ours to hold. And over time, this can contribute to depletion, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, disconnection, or a loss of reflective capacity. Attending to your nervous system after sessions is not self-indulgent. It's part of ethical, sustainable, and trauma-responsive practice. So I'm going to share with you a few practical ideas that you can use to support your regulation and yourself after those emotionally charged sessions. But I want to name up that the reality is that many of us do not have the luxury of a long pause after a hard session. There may be notes to write, a school meeting to attend to, a parent to call, or another client waiting. So that's why after session or post-session support needs to be both compassionate and realistic. So here are some really gentle practices that may help after those activating sessions. So the first one is pause before you push on. Even 1 or 2 intentional minutes can make a real difference. Before you move straight into the notes or the next task, stop and notice what's happening inside of you. You can check in with your body, and you can do this by asking yourself, what am I noticing in my body right now? Is it tiredness, shakiness, nausea, heat, tears, heaviness, exhaustion? Naming your experience can help bring you back into relationship with yourself. You can orient to the present. So you can look around the room, feel your feet on the floor, on the ground. You can notice the chair, if you're sitting down, beneath you. You can let your nervous system register that the session is over and you are here now and you're safe. You can use brief grounding strategies, so things like slow breathing, stretching, washing your hands mindfully, having a drink of water, stepping outside, or gently shaking that tension out of your body. These things can all support your nervous system regulation. You can let regulation come before analysis or trying to understand what actually happened during that session. Sometimes we can jump straight into trying to make sense before our body has had time to settle. Often we need regulation before reflection. We can write reflective notes for ourselves. So these aren't formal case notes, but answering really brief questions such as, what felt most activating in that session? What am I carrying right now? What feels like mine and what belongs to the child, parent, or system? What support do I need before I continue? You can seek co-regulation where appropriate or where you can. Sometimes what helps most is not more thinking, but safe connection. This might look like a brief check-in with a trusted colleague, bringing the session to supervision, or simply being with someone safe later in the day. You can create a transition ritual. So things like a cup of tea, taking a couple of slower breaths, stepping outside, placing both feet on the floor before you start writing your notes, listening to a grounding song in the car on your way home. Small rituals can help signal completion and communicate safety to your body. And you can be mindful and take notice of the urge to rush into action. So after a difficult session, urgency can rise quickly. Sometimes action is needed, yes, but sometimes urgency is part of that activation. So where possible, pause long enough to discern the difference. But sometimes additional support might be needed. This is when hard sessions stay with us for longer than usual. Additional support might be needed when You continue replaying that session long after it's ended, or your sleep becomes impacted, or you notice feelings of dread, emotional exhaustion, or disconnection building over time. You feel unusually reactive, fragile, or shut down across several days. The session has stirred something quite significant from your own history. You're struggling to think clearly or make grounded clinical decisions. You are carrying the session alone and feel unsure about what to do with it, or the work is affecting your body, relationships, and your sense of self. So these might be signs that the session needs to be brought to supervision or consultation, even an indicator that you might need to spend some time debriefing, or your own therapeutic support might be really beneficial. There's a real strength in recognizing when something is too much to hold alone on your own. In helping professions, there can be an unspoken pressure to hold everything well, stay steady, keep moving, and be the calm one in the room. But sustainable practice does not come from pretending that we are unaffected. It comes from learning to notice the impact, respond with care, and seek support when needed. So if a session has left you feeling activated, tender, unsettled, or exhausted, it does not mean that you're failing or you're a bad therapist. It does not mean that you're too sensitive. And it certainly does not mean that you're not meant to be working with children and families. Sometimes it means that you're deeply present. It means something important was touched in the room. Sometimes it means your nervous system did exactly what nervous systems do when they come close to fear, pain, vulnerability, or distress. Practitioner wellbeing is not only about preventing burnout at the far end of exhaustion, it's also about those smaller, quieter moments after sessions. The moments where we choose to notice ourselves, to respond with care, and to honour our humanity alongside our professionalism. And this is where reflective supervision, curiosity, and self-compassion really matter so much. Reflective practice invites us to ask not what's wrong with me for feeling this, but rather what happened in that session, what was stirred up in me, and what do I need now? That kind of reflection isn't separate from good practice, it's part of it. Perhaps this is the part of what long-term sustainability looks like in child and family work. Not becoming hardened by what we witness, but learning how to stay open-hearted without carrying it all alone or all by ourselves. So if this particular podcast episode has brought to mind a recent session that stayed with you, stirred up something personal, or left you carrying or left you feeling like you're carrying more than what feels sustainable for you right now, supervision can be a really supportive next step. Supervision offers a space to slow down, reflect on what happened, explore your nervous system response with compassion, and think more clearly about your practice, boundary, and support needs. You don't have to hold the impact of the work you do alone. So if you're looking for a reflective, trauma-responsive space to support your own growth, well-being, and sustainability as a practitioner working with children and families, please do reach out and we can explore what supervision or support can look like for you together. Until next time, take care.